So you had Oregon, you had Utah, you had Washington, you had USC, UCLA. You weren't getting there anyway. So to get to our next point that we were talking about, how will these teams do? You're going to highly disagree with me, okay? Here's the truth, and you know it. Will a USC maybe make it out once or twice? Maybe. Will a Utah now run the Big 12? Probably. But that's their way to the playoff. But Utah is sitting in such a better situation than anybody else because they're already winning the Pac-12. They're going to get to a playoff, okay? But here's the truth, and you know this to be true. USC is not going to go into the Big Ten and start doing things to teams like Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and others. They might get through there once. They might. But everybody's like, well, the Pac-12, if they get the Mountain West, they're not going to get to the playoff. Says whom? Because the playoff is now going to be expanded. They're going to get a team in. Yeah. They will get a team in. I promise you they will get it. Joe, Boise State, 1 year will get in to the playoff. More than likely. Somebody's going to get in there. San Diego State, they might get in there. But the bottom line is you weren't getting there to start off with. It comes down to, for me, now that we talk about these other teams going to these other conferences, you still getting your ass whipped. Joe, USC, UCLA, Oregon, whoever, Washington, whoever, they're going to get that ass whipped.
I completely disagree with that. So I think that Utah
they're already getting that ass whipped.
But Utah benefits the most from this because they are the perfect team to succeed in the Big 12. Regionally, it's not going to be that difficult for them to travel because they're not that far away from Texas where most of these schools are embedded. I really do think that Utah is going to dominate in the Big 12, and they're already a really well-rounded program. They fit the description of developing low 4 stars and high 3 stars into just really well-rounded football players. That works perfectly in the Big 12. That is how you're going to win Big 12 championships. TCU did it last year off of that model. Utah is going to be able to do exactly that. But I completely disagree on Washington and Oregon failing to succeed in the Big 10. I look at the Big 10 is the second best conference right now in college football. But let's be honest with ourselves how it really is. After Michigan and Ohio State, historically over the past decade, it has been extremely average for the remaining teams. Wisconsin, Iowa, but it's not the same level of average. It is. I know there are inept offenses, plenty of inept offenses in the Big Ten that there are just a lot of really average teams. Minnesota.
What do you think Les Miles
Illinois.
Was? What do you think Jimbo is?
Those teams, those mid-tier. Wait. Those mid-tier teams in the Big Ten are not comparable to the SEC. I can't believe we're flipping who's saying this.
I get that, but what I'm saying is that the teams on top of the conferences, Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, LSU.
Yeah,
those are your Power Five right now. Okay, yes. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. If you ain't beating them now, how am I supposed to believe that you're going to waltz in here and beat them again?
Wait, Oregon beat Ohio State 2 years ago.
Sure.
That's my whole point. That's my whole.
Hold on. But historically, Oregon, they won one game. Congratulations. You won one game.
I completely disagree with that. Oregon has
then
finished.
Why aren't they making the playoffs?
They just got a brand new head coach. What do you mean? They're one of the first teams in the playoff. Washington's
at the first ever playoff.
Washington and Oregon have more playoff appearances than USC. Washington and Oregon have more playoff appearances than USC.
Thank you for making my point.
I'm not making your point. My point is that they are okay. Wait. Can I finish what I was trying to say? The Big Ten is 18 teams now. For them to finish in that top 6, both of these teams, when they've been historically in the top 3 of the Pac-12 over the past decade and a half, I can perfectly see them entering the Big Ten and finishing in that top 6, and at least one of them consistently making the playoff every single year.
So 4 teams from the Big Ten aren't getting into the playoff.
You don't think now, after all the expansion, after all those teams being added, that they can't get 4 teams in? I absolutely think that they can.
Because as Ross Dellinger reported, that the college football playoff is going to pivot. And like they said, they do the expansion is to not have 4 teams into the college football playoff from one conference.
How does
Somebody's going to get left out.
How does that make sense, though? There's less conferences.
No, there's one less conference, which technically they're not out yet. My point is, yeah, cute, you can get to a playoff. But I'm talking about they're not going to go in there and run the Big Ten. Ohio State and Michigan will.
They obviously are the only 2 teams that run the Big Ten right now, but I don't think that the gap is that far, especially because we need to look at what Washington, I will concede, is not as high up in this conversation. I'm really talking about Oregon right now. Oregon has built an SEC-esque roster over there in Oregon. Dan Lanning has built a very talented team with his transfer portal actions and his recruiting rankings. He is out recruiting Ohio State and Michigan right now. And I think he's a better coach than Ryan Day. No one would want to admit that.
They're not out recruiting Michigan right now.
They finished with a top 10 class
right now. Rankings don't mean anything for these past players. Rankings mean nothing about these past players, Joe.
They have the bodies, they have the athletes, they have the 5-star recruits, they have the transfer portal players to attract and bring to Oregon.
Who are they taking out?
Who are they knocking off?
Yeah, who are they knocking off?
Wait. When you say who knocking off,
let me pivot.
Context?
Let me pivot.
Context? Okay.
So let me pivot.
Okay.
You're trying to convince me that in an 18-team conference, that they're going to be able to be more competitive in the Big Ten now. But when Mario's crystal ball couldn't.
He's an overrated coach. He's not a good coach.
Dan Lanning had the better roster than Oregon State last year.
He lost. He's in his first year as a head coach. LSU had the better roster than Texas A&M, and they lost Texas A&M. Like, what?
That is my point. Thank you. That is my point. When you go to a conference that week in, week out is tougher than what you were facing in the Pac-12, you're going to have to start. So, Joe, this is what they will face now in a month. Ohio State, Michigan, USC, let's just say Washington. The likelihood of a team's history of going 4-0 and 3-1 in that stretch is not likely.
It's
because the last one of their month historically used to be Wazoo, Oregon State, Cal, Stanford.
Also, we're kind of assuming that they have to play all 4 of those teams. We're assuming. We don't know what their scheduling is going to
name them, because the likelihood
they're going to kick the shit out. They could kick the shit out of Northwestern and Rutgers and so Minnesota.
But if you're going to sit here and convince me when you got so the SEC, okay, we're already seeing that model, Joe. We've already seen the model. When you got Texas and Oklahoma, the schedule's out, right? The schedule is out. Texas has to play in a month. Georgia, who else was it? Ole Miss. I forget the teams in order, but you remember that we came on this show and said Texas and Oklahoma just got screwed. Did we not?
There's a difference between Texas and Oregon. Texas has not been recently successful, nearly as recently successful, not even close to recently successful as Oregon. Oregon is has kicked butt in their conference for multiple seasons.
If you're not winning the Pac-12 consistently, you're not kicking shit. The only thing you're kicking.
It's not like they're winning it's not like they're playing in the American. They were still playing tough teams.
Joe, I'm just going to say this one last time on this platform.
Okay.
USC last year, Oregon in years past, when a team like Florida beats the Pac-12 champion,
we're not talking about what they're doing against SEC teams. I'm sitting here talking about how they're going to do in the Big Ten.
Scored 3 points against Georgia. 3.
In Dan Lanning's first ever game as a head coach.
Okay. Joe, I will buy you all the steak dinners that you want. Oregon is not waltzing their ass into the Big Ten and going to be consistently be a dominant program like Ohio State, Michigan.
I don't know how we measure that, but I really think that they step right in and they
championships, because the thing that you play for the most is championships.
Yeah. The Big Ten has lacked competition outside of those two teams.
It is for someone like myself who covers the SEC mostly to say, okay, well, a team can't win in the Pac-12, whether Dan Lanning as of right now and with Mario Cristobal, and Utah is the team consistently coming out. USC couldn't do it with a better roster, and you know it. With the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, they could not slow down Utah. You come out here and say USC can be overrated defensively, but all of a sudden an SEC 6 and 7 team beats that champion, and Oregon cannot dominate. The truth is, Joe, they should have been dominating for much longer because they had more stability, and you know that, and we're getting their asses kicked every single year in that championship game.
I'm just confused by the way that you're measuring success, that like if they don't win their conference every single year, they're automatically not a good team. Like that doesn't.
No, they're not. Because if you're a team like Oregon and you're saying that they're going to be more competitive every single week when you play Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, whoever the freaking Rudy Poo, it's a USC, whoever it's going to be, when you got to go through that month, the likelihood that they come out of that month with a winning record has not shown in their history. Joe, they would have to go to the Big Ten and do something that they have not been doing. An upset win versus Ohio State means nothing to me when you can't run your own conference.
As bad as the Pac-12 was in terms of viewership, they still had more parity at the top than the Big Ten. They were playing more difficult opponents on their schedule than the Big Ten.
Oh, dear Lord.
Wait, in Oregon having to play Washington, Utah, USC. Yes, I think that there are more difficult opponents at the top of the pack. There was at the Pac-12. It's been 2 teams. The only reason why Michigan and Ohio State have dominated is
in the SEC too. But who is your favorite team? Who's your favorite team in the Big Ten right now? It's Illinois, right?
No, it's not. I said that they're favored to win the West. They're favored to win the West.
Let me ask you this question. Is there any Pac-12 team that Oregon will face that has the defensive front of Illinois?
Washington. Absolutely. Washington. ZTF, Braylon Trice are 2 of the better defensive ends in all of college football and have not been recognized as such. I just don't know how you can't look at what they've done. And when the right head coach,
look at them not dominating the pack.
When the right coach is at Oregon, they're a really good program. They have Nike money in their back pocket.
All right, let's flip this really quickly. That money, let me tell you something. You ready? Here's the cold, hard truth. Money don't mean shit when that ball is kicked off.
Does when you got SEC bodies on your roster. It does matter when you got
and Oregon's not there yet. They had the most complete roster in the Pac-12. They do not have the most complete roster in college football. They're not even in the top 7. They're not.
We'll see how it plays out.